You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. I hope that your holidays were just fine, not stressed. I hope they were peaceful and loving. We have a fun show for you today to sort of ease us into the new year. This week, there's a new surrealism corner, and there's a fighting word segment that might boggle your mind. But before we get into any of that, we need to catch up on what's been happening, and for that, we need to go inside the headlines. We have to begin with the California rains, and the California 12-feet-high waves, and the California floods, and mudslides, and landslides, and sinkholes, all up and down the coast with hurricane proportions, high winds, lack of power. Storms have battered the state all this past week, and they bode to continue. That this is global climate change is surely no longer arguable, since California was baking under a massive drought for the past 4 years before this cataclysm hit. But in the good news department, abortion pills can now be offered at retail pharmacies, says the FDA. Mifepristone, the first of 2 drugs in medication abortions, previously had to be dispensed only by clinics, doctors, or a few mail-order pharmacies. Now, if local drugstores or chains like CVS and Walgreens agree, they'll be allowed to offer abortion pills in the U.S. under a regulatory change made Tuesday by the Food and Drug Administration. The action could significantly expand access to abortion through medication. Under new FDA rules, patients will still need a prescription from a certified health care provider, but any pharmacy that agrees to accept those prescriptions and abide by certain other criteria can dispense the pills in its stores and by mail order. The change comes as abortion pills, already used in more than half of pregnancy terminations in the United States, are becoming even more sought after in the aftermath of last year's Supreme Court decision overturning the federal right to abortion. With conservative states banning or sharply restricting abortion, the pills have increasingly become the focus of political and legal battles. Last December, the FDA said it would permanently lift the requirement that patients obtain mifepristone in person from a health provider, a step that paved the way for telemedicine abortion services. The second drug in the regimen, misoprostol, has never been as tightly restricted as mifepristone and is used for different medical conditions. It's easily obtained at pharmacies through a typical prescription process. It causes contractions that expel pregnancy tissue and is taken 24 to 48 hours after mifepristone. Recently, dozens of groups, including the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Medical Association, filed a citizen petition asking the FDA to take action to make it easier for mifepristone to be used for miscarriages. According to the Survey Center on American Life's American Perspectives survey, nearly 2/3, that's 65% of women between 18 and 29 think abortion should be legal in all or most cases, compared with 56% of men in the same age group and 52% of women 65 or over. The most versus all distinction is important because smaller shares tend to think that abortion should always be legal with no limitations at all. But nearly half, 48%, of 18 to 29-year-old women think abortion should be legal in all circumstances, compared with only 34% of both 18 to 29-year-old men and women 65 or over. And young women have been paying attention to the news since 14 states have successfully banned nearly all abortions over the past months. 64% of 18 to 29-year-old women say they're following news about abortion laws and restrictions very or somewhat closely. More than they share who say they're following closely news about gas prices and inflation, that's only 55%, or the midterm 2022 elections, 25%. Young women are also much likelier than Americans as a whole to say abortion's a critical issue for them personally. Yay, let's hear it for young women. By 61% to 36%. That's true compared with other women, too. Only 34% of women 65 or over say abortion is a critical issue for them. The survey raises an intriguing possibility that young women are likelier than their older counterparts to see the Supreme Court's ruling and the ensuing scramble to ban abortion in red states as an attack on all women and not just a new set of restrictions on a medical procedure. Now, let's look at international. In Iran, those brilliant, brave women persist in their revolution despite government intensifying its response, negative response. For a brief window there, it was thought that they were easing up on dress codes and everything else, including murdering students in the street. But no, they have now reimposed extreme, severe restrictions on demonstrations, on hijab, on anything suspicious being done by anyone young. The reprisals consist of everything from beatings and rapes in the street to disappearances to jail sentences that hold a minimum of months, not weeks, months. And now, of course, the executions have begun. This is a living nightmare. And yet, the students, the young, women persist. I keep wondering where the Marines are when we really need them. But the global women's movement has begun various ways in trying to establish underground railways so that the women can get out. The problem being, of course, that they don't want to leave. They want to change and save their country. And then there's Brazil. In copycat Trumpist behavior, last week supporters of extreme right-wing former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro stormed the National Congress building in Brasilia, seeking the ouster of leftist Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who was sworn in as Brazil's president after a very legitimate election a week ago. Police deployed tear gas, many arrests were made, and the Supreme Court in Brazil has already said that the rioters and insurrectionists will face jail. Back home, of course, on the anniversary of our own January 6th violent insurrection against Congress, the House of Representatives endured 15, count 'em, 15 ballots in its new Republican narrow majority's desperate attempt to lock down the speakership. I'm going to return to this subject in greater depth in a week or so because clearly the so-called Freedom Caucus of ultra-right MAGA Congress people will be wreaking more havoc on the House in days to come. But for now, let's focus on a hilarious Instagram video that has been making its way through the viral universe. It's fake voiceovers to match watching wannabe Speaker Kevin McCarthy in a shouting match with Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida. The whole House of Representatives display went on for days and nights and was a farce, a circus, and a risible catastrophe. That, of course, is not even to go into the statements that were said outright, the implications of GOP racism and sexism. They just have tin ears. The Republicans' actual nomination of Trump for Speaker, and by contrast, and I'm not just merely, simply being partisan here, well, maybe a teeny bit, but the authentic dignity and grace with which Democrats paid respect to outgoing Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and with which they welcomed their incoming leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who made a rather brilliant speech. It was, I have to confess, a hurry, get the popcorn moment when the Democrats, exhausted but cheerful after having had to sit through 4 entire days and late nights, while poor, pathetic McCarthy bargained away the people's rights in deals for committee chairships and power in a powerless body, and while their colleagues voted and revoted and revoted 15 times, well, the Democrats finally just gave up and nominated Jeffries for Speaker of the House. After all, you don't need to be in the majority, and you don't even need to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. By the way, curious about what was put on hold while the GOP boys played their little game so passionately? Well, choosing a speaker is the first order of business when any new Congress meets. The Speaker then swears in all members elect. There are no representatives in Congress's lower chamber until a Speaker is appointed, so our nation went 4 days with no House of Representatives at all. So much for the People's House. Also, it's the job of the Speaker to oversee the crafting and passing of legislation. Well, no way to do that. The Speaker is responsible for government and public oversight. Well, forget about that. The Speaker is also responsible for receiving classified briefings, and if a crisis were to occur, domestically or abroad, for instance, the House would not be able to respond. There are also issues of basic management. Amid the turmoil, House committee staffers were informed that if House rules aren't finalized by January 13th, impossible to do if you lack a speaker, committees would not be able to process payroll or student loan repayment, and so forth and so on. In short, the much-threatened government shutdown, trotted out annually in pure drama, was on the verge of actually happening. The nation watched all this with open-mouthed, gap-jawed incredulity. Personally, I ricocheted, I admit, between rib-splitting laughter at the absurdity of these guys and serious depression and disgust at them. And through it all, in a demonstration of proud bipartisanship, President Joseph Biden officiated at the opening of a Kentucky bridge, together with former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. I love this. And let's hope that everyone remembers this debacle at the next election. I doubt that they'll forget it because I fear it will be repeated by the extremist right-wingers in our Congress many, many times before then. In fact, among the first priorities of Republicans while serving in their extremely thin House majority, they voted Wednesday on 2 measures related to abortion, a key issue for the party after the court struck down Roe v. Wade last summer. One of the bills, a resolution, would condemn violence against facilities, groups, and churches, wait for it, that are opposed to abortions. The bill passed 222 to 209, with 3 Democrats voting yes. Let's remember them. Representatives Vicente Gonzalez of Texas, Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, and Marie Perez of Washington. These are all against violence against facilities and groups and churches opposed to abortions. Not that anybody's committing violence against them. The other bill would mandate health care providers, this is awful, give care to an infant that is born alive after a failed abortion. That also almost never ever happens. But the measure passed, 220 to 210, with one Democrat, Representative Henry Cuellar of Texas, joining Republicans in supporting the horrific bill. But Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York, said that the bills are doomed in the Senate because they are extreme. Chuck, you think? We have to take our first short break, but then I'll be back right away with some rather funny predictions from 1923, 100 years ago. In other words, it's time this week for the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Well, if we're going to share predictions that were made in 1923, 100 years ago, about today, 2023, we know that we must be in the Surrealism Corner. Well, for one thing, aren't you glad to know there will be no hard work anymore? No more hard work by 2023, said Dr. Charles P. Stein. And Dr. Metz, an electrical expert, believes that the time is coming when there will be no long drudgery and that people will not toil for more than 4 hours a day. So he agrees with Dr. Stein. He says this will be due to the work of electricity, and he imagines an amazing transformation by 2023 in which every city will be a, quote, spotless town, period, close quote. The Minneapolis Journal quotes Glenn Curtis, an airplane expert, predicting that by 2023, gasoline as a motive power will have been totally replaced by, wait for it, radio. There will be fewer doctors necessary. Well, I bet the AMA will not like that. And present diseases in 1923 will simply be unknown. God, it's so tragic. All people will be beautiful, so beauty contests will be unnecessary. This is not the reason why I personally thought that maybe we would have outgrown beauty contests by now, but they're claiming that there will be so many beautiful people it will be impossible to select winners, and the same will apply to baby contests, which shouldn't exist at all. By 2023, the average life of a human being could be increased to 100-year longevity. In individual cases, it could be increased to 150, perhaps 200, even 300 years. The Savannah, Georgia News predicted that by 2023, women will blacken their teeth and shave their heads. I missed that. I didn't get that memo, and I haven't done it. They also predicted in Savannah that men would have curled hair by 2023. An anthropologist was basing his statement on trends of masculine and feminine styles. The prediction is that the U.S. would have a population of 300 million. Well, that's not that far off. Flights from Chicago to Hamburg would take only 18 hours. They'd be over the pole. Newspapers would have been out of business for 50 years. 50, that's 50, which is almost the case because newspapers are certainly threatened, but not yet. Cancer will have been totally eradicated. That's what the prophecies said. Not so. But we have made progress. One Professor A.M. Lowe was dwelling on scientific war terrors, and he referred to an invention of his own, jets of water highly charged with electricity, which would render armies obsolete. I'm not quite sure how that happens. Would we drench them? I don't know. But he said that the war of 2023 will naturally be a wireless war, for there's no end to the possibilities of wonder. And he claimed that he could, with an expenditure of more than a yard, wire weaponry with no connection at all. Of course, he also predicted that mental telepathy would become common. He didn't have anything to say about drones, however. Nothing about drones or Wi-Fi, which would have been more in his wheelhouse. By 2023, there would apparently be no mail whatsoever between New York and San Francisco. It would all be, we'd say, online. They wouldn't have imagined it. Pittsburgh and London orders from merchants in, say, for example, Peking, they still use the words Peking, Beijing, we would say. Those would require 1,000-mile-an-hour freighters to make deliveries of goods before sunset. That's quite a rush. The private kitchen apparently would disappear by today. The food would be seasoned and prepared by chemical formulas, which would preserve the freshness of fruits and meats, rid them of indigestible qualities, and send them to the table ready to use. Instead of sauces that merely cozen the palate, they used words like that, we would have delectable blends of concentrated vitamins, calories, ferments, and tissue tonics. The language is interesting, isn't it? Watch-size radio telephones will keep everybody in communication with the ends of the earth. Well, as I look at my wrist and decide that I'm not Dick Tracy with a watch radio in a comic strip, and realize that in fact I'm wearing an Apple Watch, but you could say the same thing for any smartwatch, I can receive and send email on it, play music on it, receive and send texts, take phone calls and send them, discern whether I need to use a defibrillation machine, check my blood pressure, check my exercise time, make lists. I mean, I can do all sorts of miraculous things with this remarkable computer on my wrist. So I suppose that part of the future has come true. Or else my wrist alone by itself is in the surrealism corner. Time for another break, but I'll return directly with a segment that, for this week anyway, is like a continuation of the Surrealism Corner, together with Fighting Words. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Are you ready for a brain-blowing mind bender? Those might just be fighting words. I'm indebted to the chief science writer for the New York Times, distinguished writer Dennis Overby, for the intricate, startling revelations that follow. In fact, some of them are best simply quoted from a piece by Overby, which ran on October 10th of last year and was updated on October 12th. And I'm periodically going to quote from it rather than foisting on you my inept rewording of complex science. Still, I am going to hazard an attempt at this mind-bending concept and making it more accessible. I think it's thrilling. For the last century, the biggest fight in science has been between Albert Einstein and Albert Einstein. On one side is the Einstein who, in 1915, conceived general relativity, which describes gravity as the warping of space-time by matter and energy. That theory predicted that space-time could bend, expand, rip, quiver like a bowl of jello and vanish into those bottomless pits of nothingness known as black holes. On the other side of the quarrel is the Einstein who, starting in 1905, laid the foundation for quantum mechanics, the non-intuitive rules that inject randomness into the world. Rules that Einstein himself never accepted. According to quantum mechanics, a subatomic particle, like an electron, can be anywhere and everywhere at once, and a cat can be both alive and dead until it's observed. That's Schrodinger's cat, you remember. God does not play dice, Einstein often complained. Now, gravity rules outer space, shaping galaxies and the whole universe, whereas quantum mechanics rules inner space, the arena of atoms and elementary particles. The two realms long seemed to have nothing to do with each other, which left scientists ill-equipped to understand what happens in an extreme situation like a black hole or the beginning of the universe. But research in the last decade on the inner lives of black holes has revealed unexpected connections between the two views of the cosmos, outer and inner. The implications are mind-bending, including the possibility that our three-dimensional universe, and we ourselves, might be, you ready for this? Holograms. Holograms. Like the ghostly anti-counterfeiting images that appear on some credit cards and driver's licenses. In this version of the cosmos, there's no difference between here and there, cause and effect, insider or outsider, and perhaps between even then and now. We can all be Dr. Strange. Leonard Susskind of Stanford University, in a paper in 2017, wrote, "It may be too strong to say that gravity and quantum mechanics are exactly the same thing, but those of us who are paying attention, extreme expert physicists, may already sense that the two are inseparable and that neither makes sense without the other. That insight, Dr. Susskind and his colleagues hope, could lead to a theory that combines gravity and quantum mechanics, quantum gravity, and perhaps explain how the universe began." Now, the schism between the two Einsteins entered the spotlight in 1935 when the physicist faced off against himself in a pair of scholarly papers. In one paper, Einstein and Nathan Rosen showed that general relativity predicted that black holes, which weren't yet known by the name black holes, could form in pairs connected by shortcuts through spacetime. These were called Einstein-Rosen bridges. You know how boys have a tendency to name things after themselves. Wormholes, they were also called. In the imaginations of science fiction writers, you could jump into one black hole and pop out of the other. In the other paper, Einstein, Rosen, and another physicist, Boris Podolsky, tried to pull the rug out from quantum mechanics by exposing a seeming logistical inconsistency. They pointed out that according to the uncertainty principle of quantum physics, a pair of particles once associated would be eternally connected, even if they were light years apart. Measuring a property of one particle, its direction of spin, for example, would instantaneously affect the measurement of its mate. If these photons were flipped coins and one came up heads, the other invariably would be found out to be tails. To Einstein, this proposition was obviously ludicrous, and he dismissed it as, quote, spooky action at a distance, close quote. But today, physicists have a name for it. They call it quantum entanglement, and lab experiments confirm its reality every day. Last year, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to a trio of physicists whose experiments over the years had demonstrated the reality of this so-called spooky action. The physicist N. David Mermin of Cornell University once called such quantum weirdness the closest thing we have to magic. As Daniel Kabat, a physics professor at Lehman College in New York, explained it, we're used to thinking that information about an object, say that a glass is half full, is somehow contained within the object. Entanglement means this is not correct. Entangled objects don't have an independent existence with definite properties of their own. Instead, they only exist in relation to other objects. Philosophically, this existence in relationship to other things is very interesting. To astronomers, black holes are dark monsters with gravity so strong they can consume stars, wreck galaxies, and even imprison light. At the edge of a black hole, time seems to stop. At a black hole's center, matter shrinks to infinite density, and the known laws of physics break down. But to physicists bent on explicating those fundamental laws, black holes are full of mysteries and imagination. In 1974, the cosmologist Stephen Hawking astonished the scientific world with a calculation showing that, to his own surprise, black holes were neither truly black nor eternal when quantum effects were added to the picture. Over eons, a black hole would leak energy and subatomic particles. It would shrink, it would grow increasingly hot, and finally explode. In the process, all the mass that had fallen over the ages would be returned to the outer universe as a random fizz of particles and radiation. This, which might sound like good news, a kind of cosmic resurrection, was a potential catastrophe for physics. A core tenet of science holds that information is never lost. Billiard balls might scatter every which way on a pool table, but in principle it's always possible to determine where they were in the past or to predict their positions in the future, even if they drop into a black hole. But if Hawking was correct, the particles radiating from a black hole were random. It would be as if you opened your safe deposit box and found your birth certificate and passport had disappeared. As Hawking phrased it in 1976, quote, God not only plays dice, he sometimes throws them where they can't be seen, close quote. That declaration triggered a 40-year war of ideas. A potential solution came to Dr. Susskind, remember him? One day back in 1993, as he was walking through a physics building on campus, in the hallway he saw a display of a hologram of a young woman. A hologram, as you know, is basically a three-dimensional image of a teapot, a cat, Princess Leia, entirely made of light. It is created by illuminating the original, real object with a laser and recording the patterns of reflected light on a photographic plate. Then, when the plate is later illuminated, a three-dimensional image of the object springs into view at the center. I can't explain how this happens, but holograms are now a common fact of life. Here's a situation where it looks as if information is kind of reproduced in two different ways, Dr. Susskind recalls, thinking. On the one hand, there's a visible object that looked real, he says, And on the other hand, there's the same information coded on the film surrounding the hologram. Up close, it just looks like a little bunch of scratches and a highly complex encoding. The right combination of scratches on that film, Susskind realized, could make anything emerge in 3 dimensions. Then he thought, what if a black hole was actually a hologram, with the event horizon, the border, serving as the, quote, film, in other words, encoding what was inside. It was a nutty idea, but a cool idea, he recalled. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the same nutty idea had occurred to the Dutch physicist Gerardus Hooft, a Nobel laureate at the Utrecht University in the Netherlands. The cosmos as holograph idea found its fullest expression a few years later in 1997. Juan Maldacena, a theorist at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, used new ideas from string theory, the speculative theory of everything that portrays subatomic particles as vibrating strings, in order to create a mathematical model of the entire universe as a hologram. In his formulation, all the information about what happens inside some volume of space is encoded as quantum fields on the surface. Dr. Maldacena's universe is often portrayed as a can of soup. Galaxies, black holes, gravity, stars, and all the rest, including us, are the soup inside, and the information residing outside describes us. That's right. The information describing them, us, resides on the outside, like a label. Think of it as gravity in a can. The inside and outside of the can, the bulk and the boundary, are complementary descriptions of the same phenomena. Since the fields on the surface of the soup can obey quantum rules about preserving information, the gravitational fields inside the can also preserve information. In such a picture, there's no room for information loss, Dr. Maldacena said at a conference in 2004, and Hawking conceded. In other words, gravity was not the great eraser after all. In other words, the universe makes sense, Dr. Susskind said. And is completely crazy, he added. As for us entities inside, we don't read the hologram. We are the hologram. In 2012, Drs. Maldacena and Susskind provided a formal rapprochement and proposed a truce between the two warring Einsteins. They proposed that spooky entanglement and wormholes were two faces of the same phenomenon. How could information be in two places at once? Well, like much of quantum physics, the question does boggle the mind, but only like the notion that light can be a wave, which it can, or a particle, which it can, depending on how the measurement is made. What matters is that if the interior and exterior of a black hole were connected by wormholes, information could flow through them in either direction, according to John Preskill, who is a Caltech physicist and a quantum computing expert. He added, "It sounds crazy, but as Ahmed Al-Mahiri, a physicist at NYU Abu Dhabi, noted recently, we all have to get used to this." Well, I'm not sure about getting used to it, but it certainly is brain-blowing and opens up one's mind to literally infinite possibilities. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter for now, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan. And you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.